Hello, my name's Ben,
And my name's Josh.
and welcome back to FPL Graduates. Welcome back to another video where in today's video we're going to go through the transfer targets for game week 22. So without further ado, let's get straight into the video.
Okay, then, so yeah, starting off with our transfer targets for this week. For some context, before we do get started, we're recording this on Wednesday night. We're probably 80 minutes through most of the games from Wednesday night. So we've seen a fair few, but not all the teams. A lot of these assets in this video will be from the teams that have already played. So we'd have seen their performance in game week 21. Starting off with Nico Williams, had a fantastic showing up against Liverpool. I thought Forest in general played really, really well in that game. Nico Williams did a great job up against Salah, and obviously the minutes were probably the main concern. We had him in there a couple of weeks ago. He's still playing left back, doesn't seem to be getting rotated too much, touch wood. And at 4.3 million going into Southampton at home this week, could he be a decent cheap option, Ben?
Yeah, I think he's a decent cheap option, certainly. I mean, we did say let's wait and see if he retains those minutes, and he seems to have done. And the fixtures coming up for Forest, they're looking a lot better going forwards after the tough Liverpool fixture, which was nice. And, you know, they nullified Liverpool quite well in the defence. So I do think from a defensive perspective, they really are worth investing in if you haven't already got one. If you don't have one already, then maybe your rank has been impacted quite a lot over the last few weeks. But yeah, in my opinion, I think he is now a good value asset to be picking up. Okay, so next up we've got Mykolenko of Everton, and of course it's the first asset that we're starting to talk about with the double game weeks coming up with Everton and Liverpool, and Mykolenko is one of our picks. In terms of the attacking output, it hasn't been as good as in sort of previous seasons that we've seen Mykolenko, but he is sort of like on the off chance going to get a return here or there. But the minutes are very secure, and at 4.3 million for an asset that could double with that nice fixture against Leicester, and then the bonus of maybe a point or two against Liverpool means that it might be worth picking up a Everton player for the double. I do think you're probably more likely to be looking further forward on the pitch for the Everton assets, just because I'm not 100% convinced on their defence. But yeah, Josh, what's your thoughts on Mykolenko?
Yeah, I own him personally. I've had him just sat on my bench for like 10 weeks, I think it is now. I remember he got me that double-digit haul with his dodgy assist earlier in this season, so I've managed to pick up that attack and return. I think Everton, it'll be an interesting watch over the next couple of weeks in terms of how David Moyes has them set up against Aston Villa. Obviously, he conceded the one goal. Again, defensively quite solid. Going forwards, we're probably slightly better than they are under Dyche. Whether Mykolenko gets any attack and returns, I would highly doubt it, to be honest. You're looking at Mykolenko as, a way to get another doubler into your team if you want it. I think Leicester at home's a good game. Leicester offensively not been too great. So, if you're going to back an Everton defence who, let's face it, they've been one of the better defences this season in terms of expected goals conceded, in the top half of the league for that. So, yeah, I don't mind it at all if you want to really sort of attack the doubles. The fixtures in the meantime aren't the best from a clean sheet point of view. So, yeah, for me, I'd probably look towards that double only if you're going to come and bring them in. Okay, then, so moving on to the third and final defender this week, and it's going to be Ibrahima Konate. Again, looking ahead to the double game week in 24 with Everton away and Bournemouth away. He also has two fairly decent fixtures before that, though. Obviously, Brentford away is not the best in terms of clean sheets. But, if you're going to back any team in the league to keep a clean sheet there, it's probably going to be the best defence in the league for expected goals conceded. And then, obviously, Ipswich the week before. I think Konate is going to be a nice option if you, one, can't afford Trent, and two, if you wanted to double up on that Liverpool defence for the assurity of minutes. Obviously, he got subbed off in the 65th minute against Nottingham Forest, but I think that was more game state dependent. Obviously, they were 1-0 down at the time, and obviously, as soon as he got subbed off, they scored. So, yeah, I think minutes wise, he's very assured. Obviously, Joe Gomez is still going to be out injured during this time, so I don't really see Quansah sort of challenging him for minutes. Another thing you got to bear in mind as well is in between that double game week for Liverpool, they have two fixtures. They have the EFL Cup semi-final second leg, and then they have that game against Plymouth in the FA Cup. I would not expect Konate to be playing against Plymouth on that Sunday. I'd expect him to play against Bournemouth in the midweek after that. So I think there'll be plenty enough rest for him in in those other fixtures. And yeah, I expect him to obviously play that Merseyside derby too. What's your thoughts on him, Ben? Do you think he's worth the money at 5.1?
Yeah, I think he is at 5.1 million, and that's if you can't sort of get up to the Trent Alexander-Arnold of the world there. Yeah, I think the minutes are assured. Obviously, he is still working his way back up to full fitness, and getting 65 minutes is absolutely a good thing. So yeah, there's no concern for me. He is good value. You may not see sort of too many attacking returns from him, but you are sort of looking at the clean sheets more than anything else with Konate. Okay, so moving on into the midfielders, and we're going to talk about Anthony Elanga of Nottingham Forest. What great form he is in at the moment. He is matching and even exceeding Salah in some of the metrics in terms of FPL points, which is absolutely crazy at the moment. And the form that he's in, I mean, I see no reason why he can't haul against Southampton at home. That fixture is just primed and made for Elanga to get a haul on the side that he does play. Of course, sort of for the medium and longer term, we're going to expect to see those stats to even out a little bit. So don't expect to see the volume of returns that we've seen over the last few weeks for the next few weeks, because it's a little bit unsustainable for them to keep, for Elanga to keep that up at least. Josh, what's the thoughts on Elanga? Of course, sort of an ex-Manchester United player as well.
Yeah, I think he's been phenomenal. Last sort of 5 game weeks, I think since game week 16, only Mo Salah has scored more points than him in the midfielder category. He's got 45 points in that time. Super solid asset at that sort of real cheap price where we've got a lot of enablers down there. I think Southampton at home is a good fixture for him, but equally, because of the way that Forest play against these sort of, teams that can go toe to toe with them, like, Bournemouth, Brighton. We've seen it with United a few weeks ago, Liverpool. The counter-attack is always on, and it's always either Hudson-Odoi or Elanga, but probably more specifically Elanga just because of his pace in behind. And that's where he's been picking up these assists on the break. We saw it for Chris Wood's goal against Liverpool. I think he's just a phenomenal asset in general. And I think if you need someone around that price point, I would not be looking anywhere else than him at the moment. Okay, then, so we're back to the double game week conundrum, and we're starting off with Luis Diaz. We're going to talk through all 3 of the attackers in this video because I think they all warrant sort of a little piece on them all. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about the fixtures. We just did that with Konate, but obviously Diaz started and played 75 minutes against Nottingham Forest. It is going to be a bit of a roulette, I guess you could say, in terms of you're going to have to try and predict the minutes. If I was to predict right now, I would say that he would be benched against Brentford for a Jota start. He would play the Ipswich game. And then it's a bit of a toss-up in between the Everton and Bournemouth fixtures. As I mentioned, there's 2 games in between that double game week. So I think there's a good chance that we could see him and Gakpo play in both of those Premier League fixtures. What's your thoughts, Ben? If you had to rank Diaz at the moment out of the attackers, where would you be putting him?
They're all so close together, to be honest, and it's very much going to be who's playing the best out of the 3 of them, and we just can't predict that because there's so many games in between the double game weeks and so many games that we've got to play before that as well. A couple of games before that, and yes, I agree with you. I think the benching will come this week for Luis Diaz, and the start will probably come for Jota. Outside of that, I think Darwin will probably not play in the Premier League going forwards. I think he's just sort of a bit of a non-asset now with how much better the other assets are playing. So it's almost a toss-up. Gakpo, Diaz and Jota, take your pick. It's an absolute roulette, and one of those 3 is going to have a mega haul and the other 2 could very well blank. So it's going to be very, very swingy. Yeah, Diaz, I don't mind because of the versatility of playing up front and out on the left, which is a bonus. But again, all 3 of those can play in all 3 positions across the front line. So, yeah, it's anyone's guess. But Diaz, in terms of this season, has produced the FPL points. So if you are sort of looking at maybe sort of the safety, he's probably going to be sort of the higher end of the EO scale in terms of those 3 that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and obviously Diogo Jota we've got on screen now. 8 returns in only 622 minutes. Obviously got the goal off the bench against Nottingham Forest. Ben, you own him at the moment. If you do own one of these guys already, would you be looking to switch them out, or would you just be holding the cards and keeping the asset that you have?
I'd be holding. I wouldn't be wasting a transfer on any of these guys if you already own them, to be honest. In terms of the 3 assets, I think it's a little bit biased, but I am going to say I think Jota is my favourite out of the 3 because if there's any player that I believe is most likely to score even when they're benched, it's Diogo Jota. He's done it time and time again for Liverpool. The only downside is he's gotten so good at it, he could end up just being benched for a few of these games and coming on. But we all know that Jota will come on around 60 minutes and get a minimum of half an hour if he is benched, which is a bonus as well. So I almost think in terms of like, if you're looking for a player to be explosive in 60 minutes, he's your man. If you're looking for someone maybe getting 75 minutes but only getting 15 off the bench, then you're probably Diaz or sort of Gakpo. But yeah, I think out of the three, I think Jota at the moment is my favourite. So next up is Phil Foden, who came off a really good haul in Game Week 21. Almost one that's unexpected. And for me, it looks like Manchester City are definitely improving from an offensive perspective going forwards. Of course, they've got a bit of a tough fixture run coming up in the short term. So Phil Foden does run a little bit of a risk. Playing Chelsea at home and Arsenal away is not going to be the easiest. But if any team is going to turn up and do it and turn their season around, it's going to be Manchester City. So yes, it's an interesting one. Foden hasn't been great, but he's starting to show signs of the form that he showed last season. 9.2 million is a big price to pay for a bit of a risk, but if you are looking for a really big differential, then I think it's not something you should maybe sort of jump straight into, but certainly one to consider.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's almost like maybe a bit of points chasing going into this run now. For me, Ipswich away is a really tough fixture for most sides. Don't get me wrong, you could probably score a couple of goals there, but it's not the easiest game in the ticker. I know it says green there, but for me, I'd probably put it on a white. And then Chelsea at home, Arsenal away. Both defences seem to be leaking goals at the moment. Obviously, anything can happen in those bigger games, but for me, I'd probably avoid him at the moment. Obviously, they've got some new signings coming in as well, with that Marmoush sort of pending coming in this January window. I think that will take minutes from either him or De Bruyne. Obviously, sort of that Julian Alvarez kind of role is what we're expecting to see from him if he does eventually come in. And obviously, we saw when Alvarez was playing for City that affected De Bruyne and Foden's minutes. So, yeah, for me, I'd avoid. I think there's much better assets at much cheaper pricing in that midfield spot. But if you did have him in for that, obviously that brace, then fair play. Okay, then, so we're going to move on to the forwards now, and we actually have a few to talk about this week, and we're going to start off with Johan Visser. Fixture ticker looks awful on paper with 2 reds and a white, but Johan Visser seems to be scoring against absolutely anyone so far this year. I think Liverpool at home for Brentford is a fixture that I can see them scoring in, and if they are scoring goals, it tends to be him and Mbeumo who sort of get involved in it. Obviously, he got a goal against City again. He also had 5 shots in that game. Admittedly against that City defence, which is poorer than it once was. 10 goals, 3 assists so far this season. He's Brentford's all-time Premier League top goal scorer. Ben, are you interested at him? Obviously, the price tag plays quite a big importance in this, right?
Yeah, the price tag is really good, but I also do think that the front three is such a difficult one to get right. And there's a lot of good players that are in form at the moment at a cut price, so it makes it difficult for some managers to justify it. I'd maybe perhaps get past this difficult run. Yes, Visser is scoring against sort of anyone at the moment, but the fixtures don't lend itself too nicely. And with the doubles coming up, I'd almost rather play the fixtures rather than the form in this situation in particular, because Brentford, they're not sort of a top end table team. If this was Visser, who was a top end table team who had a good fixture run, I'd definitely be sort of considering. But because of the team he plays for, the consistency of that team in, the forward areas, I'd be a little bit concerned. I don't think it's a bad option, but I also sort of think, there are sort of more optimal routes that you can go for. So next up, we're going to go for Dom Solanke. Of course, didn't have the best game week this week, but going into the fixtures that Spurs have, there's goals there to be had. Everton away, Leicester at home, and Brentford away are all fixtures I'd expect Spurs to score 1, if not 2 or more goals in. And Solanke has been proven to be quite consistent and going under the radar a little bit, in my opinion. Of course, he's ticking along quite nicely. We haven't seen the real explosive hauls yet, but with the sort of amount of big chance involvement that he's getting, I do anticipate soon it being sort of a case that he gets a couple of goals, an assist, and a big points tally. Josh, what are your thoughts on Dom Solanke? Can he sort of continue to tick over nicely, or do you think that there's potential there for a haul?
Yeah, I think he's similar to Chris Wood in a way, where not as clinical by all means, but in terms of the consistency, where he won't get those double-digit hauls, he will just tick along with the odd return, every other game week. He's only had one double-digit haul so far this season, and that was against Aston Villa at home. So for me, yeah, if you're looking for an explosive player, probably not. But to be honest, like, in those forward areas, I'm more than happy to get, 3 Chris Woods or 3 Solankis up there who's going to return every other week. I'm more than happy to have that. Big chance involvement is absolutely massive as well. 21 big chances, and 20 of those are for big chances to score, and only one of those was creating. So yeah, definitely overperforming his expected assist data, but really underperforming his goal data, expected goal data. So I think there are more goals on the horizon. These fixtures as well also breed goals. You're talking about, Everton are okay defence, probably not the easiest fixture, but Leicester, Brentford, these are real good defences to target from an attacking point of view. And he's under 10% owned, which is a massive differential going into this sort of period where a lot of people will be looking at other assets that aren't Spurs assets, especially if they do get through to that Carabao Cup final.
Okay, so finally we've gone for Mr. Consistent Chris Wood up top. Of course, he's just been so clinical this season. Another goal against Liverpool. He is looking fixture proof against anyone, which is fantastic to see. And the fixtures coming up look really good for him. To be honest, I think it's almost a case that you do need to sort of have a plan of bringing him in if you don't have him already. I personally don't have him, and I'm sort of wanting to get him in, as soon as possible. But the fixtures that he's got coming up, it's going to be a move that you're going to want to make sooner rather than later. Of course, it's difficult with only 3 striker spots. You can only sort of have so many. He's tickling along really, really nicely. Is that move going to be a difficult one for some managers to make, dependent on the strikers in their team, Josh?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, if you've got some cheaper strikers, maybe like a João Pedro, it's quite a bit of money to try and find to get it up to Chris Wood now. He's nearly at £7 million. The one thing, like we say, is just he's so consistent. I wouldn't even look at the data on the right-hand side because, he just doesn't need very many chances. 18 big chances this season and 13 goals. It's just so remarkable. So, yeah, for me, he's a fantastic asset. The fixture run lends itself as well. Obviously, Southampton at home is fantastic. Bournemouth are a decent defence, but they still concede goals. And then you got Brighton as well, who aren't one of the better defences in the league. So, yeah, I'd be more than happy to be trying to bring him in. In terms of the forwards, I think it's Isak and then him at the moment. Like, these two are just on a different level in terms of their consistency. And obviously his price is only going to go up. What does surprise me is that he's not even, I think he's around 50 to 60% EO, which means you're still getting, really decent gains out of him. And he's really clinical in terms of the bonus points as well. If Forest concede and he's scored, he's almost guaranteed to get on those bonus points, as we saw against Liverpool. So yeah, really, really nice asset. If you need a forward this week, Chris Wood's probably the guy. Okay then, so that wraps up our Game Week 22 transfer targets. Obviously, it's a really quick turnaround. Again, it's almost like we're back in Christmas with these game weeks. So make sure you do smash the like button if you haven't already, as we really appreciate your help.
Yeah, absolutely. As always, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I've been Ben.
I've been Josh.
See you guys
next time. Have a good game week, everyone.
Oh, you